Hi, everybody. Today is Monday, June 9th, 2025, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pep.
Nima, you have no idea how crazy this week is here in Moscow. Everything is happening and very fast. So we could talk for 10 hours today.
So let's get started, Pepe, with what's going on with the conference in Moscow. We've learned that the father of Elon Musk is there. Somehow it's so surprising and amazing. I have never heard of him and going to any country talking with. What's going on in Moscow with the conference? It seems that the topic of the conference is the future of Moscow, the future of Russia. Go ahead, your take on that.
Yes, this is an extremely touchy subject. And I'll ask you, Nima, and our audience to understand what I'm going to say without saying it. I have to be very careful because I am in the middle of an investigation about what this forum this week is all about. It's quite shady. It had been in the making for months, and then nothing happened for other few months, and then everything precipitated in the last minute, and they changed the agenda over and over again. So it's a bit of a stretch to try to predict the future, the future of Russia by 2050, when most of us will probably be dead. So anyway, this is enormous. They even published a report about that, which is quite mediocre for that matter. But well, many of our friends are here. Yesterday night, I spent the night with Larry Johnson. We were talking about a lot of stuff, including this forum, what's going on in the US, etc. George Galloway. So many of our friends are here, but they don't know about the inner workings of this conference. Okay, I'll give you the short version to all of you. By now, many of you may know that Errol Musk, the father of Elon Musk, is here. And he made a big splash today at the forum, basically praising Russia to the skies, correctly, in fact. Americans are very provincial. Now, they don't travel much. It's his first time in Russia. And obviously, can you imagine? He arrives in Moscow. He sees this spectacular city, the cultural heritage, the art and architecture, clean as a whistle. At night is, absolutely astonishing. Obviously, he was impressed. So he says, yes, this is like the new Rome. It's Rome 2.0, which in many aspects it is. And by the way, as many of you know, Moscow is the third Rome. First Rome, second Rome, Constantinople at the time of Byzantium, and the third Rome, Moscow. But obviously, Eero was extremely impressed by the visual and the cinematic aspects of Moscow, especially at night, which is something quite dazzling. And of course, the city is more beautiful year after year. I've been coming here now every year for a while, and it's more beautiful year after year. And in summer, where everyone is outside, it's a short summer. People only have maximum 3 months to enjoy life outside. It's absolutely outstanding. You have dinner in Moscow outside in summer, like I had this Saturday, for instance, and it's a magic experience. So he praised Moscow. He praised Russians. He said Russians are among the smartest people on the planet, which is also correct. Just take a look at their long lineage in human sciences, in literature, in exact science, in math, physics, chemistry, you name it. And of course, why he is here? That's the key question. We can say, the short version, that the real target of this forum was to bring Errol Musk here as a sort of introduction to later on bring a good deal of Silicon Valley, but I'm talking about the level of the ultra high level players, like his son, Elon, of course, which sooner or later will show up here as well, and Peter Thiel, the head of Palantir. It's no wonder that today there was a lot of praise directed to Peter Thiel. So, if I can put it very diplomatic, the oligarch behind this forum, he's doing a very, very conscious power play, not only to impress the Russian leadership with his American connections. And I know the people who actually invited all of them. I don't know who invited Errol Musk, but I know who invited the other ones because they're all my friends. And at the same time, he's impressing the Americans. And this would be via Errol Musk when he goes back to the US to say, look, the new frontier is Russia. Come here, invest here, let's do business here. So this is, let's say, the business arrangement behind this whole thing. And of course, you have, a few token, very well-known people in the panels, like our friend George Galloway, for instance. But the real focus is this connection, this developing connection with some pretty heavy hitters in Silicon Valley. From the point of view of Russian PR, that's not bad at all. From the point of view of having Elon Musk, and now he's going to be all over the place, what he said about Russia in Russia, it's a fantastic PR coup. There's no question about that. We don't know where this is going next. There's got to be some, I would say some lineaments of some sort of business deals in the making. And of course, a lot of people are joking about it, that soon, considering this fake rift, Elon can come here and ask for asylum in Russia, which ties in with, I was in Nizhny Novgorod last week this was a very, very serious forum. It was the Global Digital Forum. And inside this forum, we had the first meeting of a new organization called Global Fact-Checking Network. I am part of this organization. And it's basically young IT and diplomat experts in Russia, very, very good, but with Global South connections. So there were people from all over the Global South, including a lot of Africans, which was the most beautiful part of the summit of the last week, was talking to our friends from Nigeria, from Senegal, from Mali, from South Africa. This was excellent. And the general idea of this, let's say the first building blocks of this new organization, under the framework of a Russian-sponsored Global Digital Forum, was the discussion about fact-checking at several levels, going beyond fake news, and the first efforts, including Europeans. There were two Germans, for instance, who presented an idea last week of a sort of, let's say, a market of news, like going to a supermarket to buy news. And this concerns essentially our friends from Africa. They need an investigation about something, or they need a profile about something, or they need a specific report. They can go to this supermarket and buy it for a very accessible price, and then they can also distribute to the rest of Africa. So it's a wonderful idea. Everything is in the beginning, but the fact that we had these open discussions in several panels was excellent, Lima. Was really, really great. And much later, it's not going to be at BRICS in Rio in 1 month from now. It's going to be probably for the BRICS next year, which is going to be in South Africa. It's going to be in Africa. have all these experiments, these labs, and the development of this organization, this fact-checking global organization, getting to the BRICS table. And then we can have maybe the BRICS plus all the group, the BRICS plus the partners, plus the new BRICS, which we're probably going to have new BRICS next year. Okay, let's invest in a different media landscape, completely separated from the West, uh, focused on the global South, not letting the West control the narrative anymore. So this means that sooner or later, it could be from 2025 to the end of next year, we could be going to the direction of something like the BRICS net and the BRICS tube instead of YouTube. This is all possible because it will be essential to have a mechanism to combat fake news, especially coming from governments or institutions. Governments can be the previous American administration, for instance, which was a machine of fake news, or the European Union, the European Commission, which are, I would say, a mega industry of fake news on a daily basis. You need your separate media environment, and it will have to be a global South media environment. So all that, Nima, and all of you, our audience, it was discussed in detail last week in Nizhny Novgorod. It was absolutely fascinating, and I hope at least some of it will arrive at the table at the BRICS in Rio. But we should expect next year big developments, and of course, having the beginning of an alternative media landscape being constituted all over the global South.
Pepe, we know that the the guy who's negotiating with Ukrainians, Vladimir Medinski, he had an interview with RT, Russia Today,
Was
and
excellent.
it was many points that we haven't learned from Russians that much
Exactly.
specifically
In
about the
detail,
process.
yes.
Yeah, here is part of what he said, Pepe.
Yes.
Я вам скажу одну вещь, Рик.
I will say one thing, Rick, which I have never said before publicly. If Ukraine wanted, if Ukraine were ready, if it made its own decisions, we would have been able to sign on February 28th, 2022. During that first meeting, and the conditions would have been much softer than what we're offering today. By and large, all we have wanted is for Ukraine not to enter NATO, not to have any NATO military bases on its territory. I told them, you can be like Austria, a beautiful, prospering country. You can have an army like Austria. And second, bring back the Russian language and the Orthodox Church. Make them equal, give them equal rights, because that's amazing. You can speak Arabic in Israel, you can speak Hebrew in Palestine, but you cannot use Russian in Ukraine. There, actually, 3/4 of the population are speaking Russian.
Yeah. He mentioned many points that he said that the conditions, the terms were more lenient in 2022 than
Softer.
today.
Translated
Softer, yeah.
from Russia, literally, Nima, when he said the terms were softer
Softer,
than that we were offering today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's lenient. But after all, when we look at the way that he's picturing the situation right now, between the situation that is happening actually between Ukrainians and Russians, what do you get from this interview? What are the main points that he's making?
The main point, I think, I'm gonna read another stretch, Nima, if you allow me.
Yeah.
The last proposal from our side was this. He's talking about Istanbul. 2 territories, Donbass, 2 regions that do not want to be part of Ukraine. Previously, we proposed returning them to Ukraine with autonomous status so that they could simply elect their own government. Ukraine refused and said, we will conquer them. They were unable to conquer them. So, you know, over and over, it gets more hardcore for the Ukrainians. That's one of the key points of the interview. And he says, we do not need a war at all. Why did the situation for Ukraine get so much worse? Because referendums were held in 4 regions. They're officially part of Russia. Russia cannot leave them because they would betray all people over there. It's enshrined in the Russian constitution. So these are the red lines. And the Ukrainians still don't understand that. And it will get worse. If the conflict is stopped along the front line, no real peace agreement is reached, just some kind of truce, ceasefire, whatever. You know, and then he gives the example of Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's going to be frozen like Karabakh, and then we'll come back again. And then the parallel with Ukraine. After some time, Ukraine will join NATO, try to recapture these regions, and that will be the end of the planet. It will be a nuclear war, which parallels what Putin has been saying on and off these past few days as well. Putin is giving hints that if the collective West goes for nuclear war, they will get it. And Russia is ready. And the West has no idea what Russia can inflict over, especially over Europe, which has nothing to counteract and obviously the US historically will be away, just looking. It's not their war. This is part of Trump's rationale. Trump does not want a war against Russia. But if the Europeans want a war against Russia, they said, okay, go ahead, as long as you buy our weapons. So the Americans are obviously, they're much, it's very, very wily. And they're much more experienced than the bunch of toothless chihuahuas in Europe who think like this absolutely stupid Fiona Hill, who used to be an advisor on Russian policy in the US. She says that, she said in an interview a few days ago that the UK is at war with Russia. If the UK was really at war with Russia and vice versa, the UK by now would be an underwater parking lot. Call Mr. Belgorod. It just take one phone call to Mr. Belgorod and there's no more UK. So these people have absolutely no clue about what's involved in a nuclear exchange, especially with a nuclear superpower like Russia. Just like they were stupid enough to launch a provocation like the drone attack on one part of the Russian strategic triad, thinking that Russia will not do anything about it. They actually believe that, Nima. And when I say they, it's something that, of course, it's not fully established because the Russian investigation still continues. But obviously, we discuss this among ourselves, analysts, all the time. Was it a rogue faction of the CIA in combination with a rogue faction of the MI6? Or did it come from the top, from the CIA and from MI6, with input from Mossad, and then everything going to SBU in Kiev? Who kept Trump out of the loop, assuming he was out of the loop? It's not guaranteed that he was out of the loop. What is the most probable scenario is that these silos, these rogue factions, which have direct access to the president, they can come to the Oval Office and said, Mr. President, we're going to launch an operation against Russia, but you don't need to know all the details. This is quite possible. It happens all the time. And obviously, it happened with the previous auto-pen administration. The guy couldn't even find his way to the bathroom, and obviously nobody was going to tell him what was going on around the world. With Trump, it's more complicated. You need some sort of ruse, which these people are very good at, to, okay, Mr. President, you're going to have plausible deniability. If it goes in the south, he won't touch you. The problem is this operation touched him. If he knew, worst possible scenario. If he didn't know, even worse possible scenario. So there's no way out for him with this. And this is what we are, all of us, we are sure this is what Putin was trying to impress on him in that famous phone call, 1 hour, 50 minutes. Putin wanted to be sure what was Trump's real position on the drone attack on the strategic bombers. Obviously, there were no leaks about it. So we don't know in the end how was Putin's judgment about it. But the way this is progressing, and now very, very fast, whatever was Trump's position, in the loop, out of the loop, partially in the loop, it doesn't matter. Because what happened probably was the final spark for Putin. Okay, let's release the dogs. So far, he has been, Russia was like this. In fact, Russia was like that, nah? The hands behind their back. Now, they are advancing on building the famous buffer zone in 3. First stage of the response was absolutely devastating, and this is only the first stage. There will be probably a second, a third, or more. And of course, combined to how the master stroke in diplomatic terms, how Putin and Medinski turned around completely what was certainly a trap. Nuclear triad, your response is going to be devastating, is going to alienate a great deal of the world, and at the same time you're going to abandon the Istanbul negotiations. None of that happened. Medinski went to Istanbul impeccable, with his poker face, with his deep knowledge of everything. He's been dealing with this since before Istanbul. In fact, he knows the dossier back and forth with all the details. It's interesting because in the beginning of the interview, Nima, he actually praises the Ukrainian military. He respects the guys on the other side because he knows that they are in an impossible position. He starts like this. I feel that deep down, they, the Ukrainian side, are better than they want to appear. They even want to say something, but they can't. 2/3 of their delegation is in military uniform. They are military personnel. I look into their eyes. They are no different from Russians. They're exactly the same. I see in their eyes a reluctance to fight. So we have the top Russian negotiator, demonstrating empathy with his adversary. And obviously, they talk in Russian. They understand each other. And outside of the table, they can have frank conversations, both sides, And Medinski understands their position very well. And this is something that he heard in the past. In fact, I think this was still in 2022. One of them told him, look, you have only one boss. I have 3. And we know more or less what that means in the Ukrainian case. No?
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, Medinski is such a capable guy in diplomatic terms, historical background, etc. So he understands the big picture. And at the same time, he's telling them, look, guys, this is the last chance saloon. If you don't take it now, it's going to get much worse for you from now on. Like you remember in the first meeting, in fact, he said, look, it's not going to be 4 regions. It's going to be 8. And that's where we're going. Now that the Russian forces are already in Dnipropetrovsk, soon it's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8. No question about that. And the commanders on the field, they know that. For instance, when I was in Donbass in February, some of them were saying, look, we are just waiting for the big one. The big one is the order to go all the way. And others were saying, look, we were traveling to Ugledar, which had been liberated. This was February. Ugledar, I think, was liberated in September, October, so only a few months. And one of the commanders were saying, you see those planes going all the way west of Ugledar? That's where we're going. And we know where we're going to be in summer, Dnipropetrovsk. Guess where they are now, Nima? They are entering Dnipropetrovsk. So these are the guys in the terrain. These are the guys who know the war on an everyday basis, and they know where this is going. Exactly. And of course, they have the motivation, and now they have the full force of the Russian offensive, which has not even started yet. So all that is moving very, very fast. And then we have those idiots in Europe, be it in the UK, in France, or in Germany, and they continue to ramp up and think that there's a chance of victory in the future. It beggars belief how stupid they can be, and of course they're being paid for it. These people are just emissaries of larger interests, Atlanticist interests, including industrial military interests, and linked to the industrial military complex in the US, of course.
Pepe, today Lavrov said, before coming up to live, you mentioned the way that Lavrov was talking today. He said something so important, in my opinion, that the British are fully involved, or were fully involved, in Ukraine's terrorist attacks against Russia, or maybe in the present time he considers that they're doing the same right now as we talk. They're preparing for new terrorist attacks.
Yes, yes, because don't forget the Black Sea. The Brits are absolutely obsessed to inflict some sort of serious damage to the Russians in the Black Sea. There is a P-8 observation plane hovering across near Sochi today, for instance. So they are looking at Crimea all the time, because this is the peculiar obsession of Kiev, an attack on the Kerch bridge. And the Brits are looking at the Black Sea as a whole, all the way to the eastern part of the Black Sea, where Novorossiysk is, where great part of the Black Sea fleet is now in Novorossiysk. It's not in Crimea anymore. So we could expect, if that happens, probably we could say that then we finally will have the Russian gloves off vis-a-vis the Brits. Now we are at the diplomatic stage, which is already very serious. You have the Minister of Foreign Relations directly accusing London and MI6 of organizing, masterminding, executing, weaponizing, and facilitating terrorist attacks in Russia. So it is already very serious. But the straw that will break the camel's back is if something pretty hardcore happens in the Black Sea.
Pepe, in the meeting that Donald Trump had with the German Chancellor Merz, he said that he had an analogy that he mentioned it during the talk with Putin. The analogy is that two kids are fighting each other. And he mentioned, it seems that he said that to Vladimir Putin, Russia and Ukraine, two kids, that lot of energy right now. Maybe if they fight on and on, they can get tired of fighting each other. I would wonder if he was honest in the way that he mentioned, he said that to Putin, what would be the reaction of Putin? Eh,
We
This
can
is so amazing the way that it's just little
no,
kids are fighting each other.
you
Go
have
ahead.
Nima, you have no idea how people are really pissed here in Moscow with this observation, which is childish, immature, frankly stupid, and debasing what Russians see as an existential war, because it is. If you have NATO on the western borders of Russia, it is an existential threat. All of this being debased to kids squabbling in the sandbox or something. Only Trump can come up with something so vile and stupid and from the brain of a 6-year-old. It's really ridiculous. You know, a president of the United States saying that. Obviously, he doesn't understand anything. And even if he's addressing his mentally impaired great part of MAGA electorate, I was discussing this with Larry yesterday night. Once again, and many of us agree on the key point. Trump speaks with a vocabulary of maximum 50 words, 60 maybe, repeated ad infinitum over and over again. It's a repetition drone, because he knows that most of his audience, they cannot understand something slightly more sophisticated than that. They have maximum the level of a teenager in 6th grade. This is over 60% of the American population. So it is a nation of semi-zombies. No question about that. So obviously, if he wants to communicate with them, he has to communicate in a language that they understand, which is a strip to the bone English for somebody who's at 6th grade maximum. Okay, we understand how he does that. It's very, very clever from his part. I'm sure he is able to express himself in a more dignified way. But when he comes up with an image like that, Russia and Ukraine squabbling in a playground, he knows that his audience will get it. You see? And that's why it's so worrying.
Because the audience is not MAGA. It's not that doesn't have anything to do. The audience is international.
No,
Many
the
people
audience is
are
yes, it's a mix of everything, Nima. It's the MAGA crowds, but also people around it, or independents, or uneducated, or whatever, you know. Basically, the level of education in the US nowadays is beyond appalling by any standards. So, as president, you have to pay attention to that. And this is, I would say, this is a conscious strategy from Trump's part. The problem is, if you apply this to an extremely complex international relations issue like this one, wow, it makes once again the president of the United States sounds like an idiot.
Yeah.
And obviously, Putin, of course, Putin was personally pissed with this image. If people here discussing at dinners in Moscow are pissed, you know, average people who don't follow politics in depth, it's all over the country, because everybody knows. This is something that everybody in Russia knows, agreeing or not agreeing with the way the SMO proceeds. They know that NATO advancing towards Russia is an existential threat. As much as if this was an American case, if America was not protected by, what was it, Bismarck who said it? America is free because they are on both sides of America, there's only fish. Well, if America was not protected by lots of water and fish on both sides, can you imagine if they had neighbors who were pointing missiles at them in their borders? It would be exactly the same reaction. And which was always the reaction among those squabbling principalities, kingdoms, and states in Europe throughout European history.
One of the issues, Pepe, that Medinsky mentioned during this interview is the case of the body of Ukrainian soldiers, that the government in Kiev is not interested in taking them back
Mhm.
to Ukraine. How it seems that in the Russian media they're just talking a lot about this.
A lot,
Yeah.
non-stop. Now it's back to back because it's easily identifiable. The reasons are so obvious. They don't have $2 billion to pay the families of over 6,000 dead in the war. Number one. And number two, if they accept the bodies, it accepts their absolute failure because these bodies mostly they come from Kursk, which was sold by the sweaty sweatshirt and his gang as a success. So they have to admit their failure, they have to admit that they blunder heavily, and they have to pay with money that they don't have. So now everyone in Russia, if you go to a village in the Arctic and you ask the locals, they're going to say, yeah, they totally understand the motives now. And Russian media, at least they had explained this over and over again. And it was brilliant. On today is Tuesday. Yesterday, they took a group of journalists to actually see the Frigo trucks with the bodies of the Ukrainians over there, and the Ukrainians didn't show up. So now this has been the images are all over the place. Obviously not in the West, but where it matters, all across the global South.
The other point that he has mentioned is, according to him, to Medinski, the Ukrainian delegation wasn't free to speak openly, and let alone make decisions.
I'm sorry, Nima. We talked about this a little while ago. I read it to you.
Yeah, I know, but I mention it again because I want to know if we assume that Donald Trump he really wants to get something by these negotiations. These signs that Russians are sending to him by this interview on the part of Medinsky, which we know that he's negotiating on the part of Russia, and he tries to clarify what has happened to us. Who's going to get pressure from these? Do you think that the administration in the United States, Donald Trump himself, is going to be, after learning about this, are they going to be concerned? Are they going to, because if they're not in charge of making decision to talk openly with Russians, then who sent them, and what is the purpose of these sort of talks? And who's going to make the decisions? Is that going to be Zelensky? Is that going to be, as Lavrov mentioned, it's the London going to make the decisions on the part of Ukrainians? These are, in my opinion, Donald Trump has a decision to make. He has to understand what the reality of what's going on. These are signs for him.
He doesn't deal with reality, Nima, as we all know. He deals with the reality shows and accumulation of reality shows. And now reality is staring him in his face and punching his face. And he needs to make a serious decision. Does he really want some sort of accommodation with Russia, which implies respecting the Russian red lines and respecting the overall discussion of US-Russia relations, including Ukraine? Ukraine is part of a much, much bigger picture, which was exactly what those letters that Putin sent to Washington and to NATO in December 2021. Let's talk about indivisibility of security for everybody, European space, Eurasian space as a whole. And of course, including you Americans, which implies how you're going to, let's say, rearrange NATO. There was no response. And in fact, was it Lavrov? I bumped into this a while ago. Was it Lavrov? Because the quote was fantastic, Nima. I think it was Lavrov at the forum this afternoon. He was saying that Blinken refused to acknowledge that the key problem was expansion of NATO, and basically proposed, okay, we're going to have a new addendum to the START treaty. We will be able to position missiles in Ukraine, and you on the other side of the border, Russia, you can do the same. So this proves once again that Blinken, who was an absolute idiot, didn't understand the enormity of what he was saying. Stationing missiles inside Ukraine right across the border from Donbass. So Lavrov mentioned this afternoon, and he was startled when mentioned that. And very few people know this, because this was part of their, I would say, back channel negotiation between the letters, which was sent in December, and the start of the SMO, which was in February. So this was probably being discussed, let's say, in January between Lavrov and Blinken on the sidelines, underground. I think it's the first time that Lavrov mentions that. And I think when he said that, we should try to find the quote, Nima. He actually says that it's the first time that he's letting it out, which is another element for all of us of how disconnected the Autopen administration was of the whole thing. Well, first of all, because what we know is that they didn't give a damn, because their plan was ready. Concentration of Ukrainian forces on the Donbass border, backed by NATO and ready to go on a blitzkrieg. And this is what the SVR, Russian Foreign Intelligence, they were sure that this was going to happen. So they gave Putin 3 dates. This was in February. They gave 3 dates in February. Look, they're going to launch this blitzkrieg here, here, and here. So Putin had something like, I would say he had like 24 hours, maximum 48, to make a decision. And this was the beginning, the actual beginning of the SMO. His hand was forced. If he didn't do anything, we would have had Plan A, the NATO Kiev blitzkrieg, going into Donbass and killing a lot of civilians. So obviously he could not possibly accept it, right? And this is something that the Russians, they tried very, very hard to explain. Obviously, the West would never listen to it. But a great deal of the global South understood. For instance, when Xi Jinping came to visit Putin, Putin explained to Xi Jinping in person all that we're talking about in detail. And then Xi Jinping was finally convinced that, yes, obviously, there was nothing else you could do. If it didn't happen with China, he would have to have, it would be the same decision. So when you look at what Lavrov revealed today about the, let's say, the preamble to the SMO, and what Medinski reveals in this interview of, okay, we could stop this war now and the conditions were not so bad for you. Basically, we want you to be neutral, reinstate the Russian language in the west of Iran, and if you want to keep Donbass, give them total autonomy. So the conditions were very, very, very acceptable for Ukraine before Istanbul.
Yeah, but those days are gone.
Those days are gone, Nima. But I think it's important for all of us now to review the timeline in what was really happening in the negotiations before the SMO and in the negotiations immediately after the SMO in Istanbul. So everything that happened afterwards could have been avoided. But obviously, as we all know, there was never a plan B for the collective West. And then in this case, really collective West, because this was the Autopen administration dictating their orders to the Europeans. And the Europeans obviously gladly on board because they thought, finally, we're going to inflict a strategic defeat of Russia, dismember Russia, and grab all that wealth. It's what they thought in the beginning, that they would strangle the Russian economy, that there will be regime change in the Red Square, you name it. It's absolutely crazy. But the good thing, I think, is that now we have this historical stretch now is very, very clear for everyone who followed it from the beginning. And the Russians, when they review what happens since December 2021, they are more and more convinced that there's no other way except demilitarization, complete demilitarization of Ukraine and of NATO at the same time, which is what's already happening. And the denazification means regime change in Kiev. No question about that. They will not deal with these people, with these gangsters anymore. For all practical purposes, Moscow now sees Kiev as a terrorist regime. So that's it. So it will have to go. They will decide how. But this regime in Kiev is history. We still don't know the date, the expiration date, but it's history. Try to explain this to Trump, Nima, which Putin did not. I think Putin did not go to these extremes, but at least he laid down the path to Trump. So this is where it's going. And if you want to be praised as a peacemaker, first you have to understand what happened for the past 4 years, understand our red lines, and understand what's happening in the battlefield. And then we can start discussing seriously. If you don't admit any of that, we're not going anywhere. In fact, we Russians are. We will continue the SMO, which will be a CTO, a counter-terrorist operation, in our own terms until we decide to stop.
You mentioned something that I was wondering, why is that the case of that the West doesn't have a backup plan, a plan B for Ukraine. It seems to me that, as the case of Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, they don't care about Ukraine. They don't care about what would happen to Ukraine. That's why they don't have a plan B. They don't want to have it.
Absolutely, Nima, you're correct.
Do you think that Russia understands that?
Of course they do. The Russians know that this is a proxy war using Ukrainians, and Ukrainians don't matter. They matter less than a grain of sand to these people. The European war especially, is until the last Ukrainian. No question about that. Okay, you have all those NATO clowns behind, of course. Some of them are being eviscerated or exterminated as we speak, but it's a war until the last Ukrainian, which ties with Ukrainians not even admitting that they have to recover their dead, because they don't care about the dead. Expendable. And on top of it, we have to pay. Wow, they're dead, we don't want them, and we have to pay for them. No, we don't want anything. This is the short headline of the Ukrainians not recovering their debt. Of course, it's part of the European war using them, and financed by Europe and paid by Europe, weaponized by you name it. You name it. It's if you analyze it from I wouldn't say pacifist, but if you analyze it from a more down-to-earth, a grounded perspective, rational perspective, everything is supremely irrational, toxic, irrational. But that's reality. That's the way it is. And this war, this unnecessary war from the beginning, is beyond toxic. But once again, Nima and all of you, we have to put it into the bigger game, the larger perspective. This was the collective West probably final attempt to destroy Russia from the outside and from the inside. It failed miserably. So in terms of strategic defeat for the collective West, this is something for the history books forever. They cannot admit it. They simply cannot admit it. So they will keep postponing it. And many more Ukrainians will die for that. Many more Ukrainians which will not be recognized by their own government. How humiliating is that for the families? For the guys who were forced to go to the front line or volunteer, and for their families. It's a human tragedy. It's absolutely horrible. But they have no scruples, you know. For them, it's normal.
I remember recently Vladimir Putin had an interview in which he was asked that if he knew about the Russian economy that would be so strong to sustain the problems of this war in Ukraine, said he was not aware of that. He didn't know that much how strong the Russian economy is to go to war. Right now, it seems that the case of the Russian army is the same. Look at the Russian army before the conflict started and today. It's unbelievable. It's
unbelievable.
Not even comparable.
And now it's a battle-hardened army, Nima. They have combat experience that nobody in the West has. So you better not mess with them again. These people will mess with them again, and they'll pay a much higher price. And in terms of the economy, it's amazing. I see this every day. The ruble keeps going up all the time. I remember compared to last year, or even compared to the beginning of the year when I was here, now the ruble, and if you have rubles, wow, you can buy piles of dollars with your rubles. It's a strong economy, and everywhere you see it, full employment, you know, everything, no homeless people, no, you name it. We're going to see in St. Petersburg now. I'm very curious to see industrial indexes in St. Petersburg next week. Everybody that matters in Russia is going to be at the forum St. Petersburg next week. So this will be very important. How resilient, how strong is the Russian economy now, and for the foreseeable future.
Pepe, just to wrap up this session, we know that there was a new election in Poland, and the new president is somehow more aggressive toward Russia, and he says that Russia is the
What else is new?
It's so amazing to see Europeans so much out of short of choices, short of option when it comes to Europe. Pepe, when I know that you travel a lot and you go to Europe, to many countries, how do you find the population, the public opinion in Europe? Do you think that the public opinion is represented by these people, these leaders?
It's a nightmare, Nima. I get this from my connections in Paris, of course. German friends, the Germans who were in Nizhny last week, we talked a lot about the internal situation in Germany. By the way, they want to leave. One of them is already leaving and the other one wants to leave. And many people in France, they are dying to leave as well. And leave France is very complicated, legal reasons, income tax, and it's a very complicated affair. But they're desperate. And Americans, I met some Americans who are receiving inquiries from American families from all over the US who want to leave the US to come to Russia and start a new life in Russia. So there is an exodus of critical minds, of course, critical thinking, and people who feel totally isolated, people who cannot, they don't have interlocutors. This is something that I see where I live in Europe, in Paris. But in my case, I am a hermit when I am in Paris. I don't talk to anybody. I can't. I was deserted by close friends, which is, I don't care. I knew this would happen. but and I'm used to having my best dialogue with somebody who, like with you online or via email or exchanging messages with my friends all over the world. But it's a bit sad when you are in your own city and you have nobody to talk to. And my Italian friends, the same thing. Very well educated people, academics, etc., and they communicate via Telegram channels, for instance. And in Germany, it's getting much worse. As they told me, now it's getting to the point where if you pronounce your non-adherence to the single Brussels-Berlin narrative, you can go to jail. You can practically lose your citizenship. They can confiscate your bank accounts, whatever, which is exactly what they did to those two journalists, Roper and Lip. And an extra example, I was discussing with Che Bowles in Nizhny as well. The story where you have an Irish citizen, a citizen of the European Union, who goes to another EU country to cover a democratic election, and he's arrested at the airport and deported. So it's going to get much worse from now on. This is just the beginning. And the brainwashing, my friends in France tell me, and every time that I go, I just turn on the TV in France for 10 minutes and you get everything. The brainwashing is even worse now than it was a few months ago. So it's I will write about this in the column I'm planning to write tomorrow morning. I'll be talking about fake news. I'll be talking about new possibilities for the global south, but I'll also be talking about how European citizens are imprisoned. It's a prison of their own making, and it's a prison made by the elites in Brussels as well, and they have no possibility of escaping anytime soon. And now, even in the case of Germany, it's even worse. The BlackRock chancellor, he's an extremely dangerous character. This is something that we should analyze further on. I'm planning a column as well. I received excellent information from investigative reporters in Germany about what MERS is all about. He's beyond toxic. So there's no way out. And don't forget, Nima, in a few days, we're going to have the NATO summit in Holland, which, of course, they're going to regurgitate the whole crap over and over again. There won't be any big announcement, but everything is there. And everything, if you go to read NATO papers, and you look at what NATO will be up to 2030, which is preparing itself for a forever war with Russia. So it's only 5 years until 2030. They will be discussing this in Holland in less than 2 years from now. Yeah, it's grim. It's grim. The whole thing is extremely grim. Yeah.
Actually, the NATO Secretary General Rutte, he
Rudy, yeah.
He said that
Rudy.
He said that Europe benefits from prolonging the conflict in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine.
Oh yes, the standard of living in Europe is fantastic, Nima. Wow, you should go to Paris, one of the cleanest places in the world.
History would punish them the way that nobody would expect it. History would judge these people.
The judgment of history will be unforgiving. Yeah. But we're going to have to wait a long time for it. Well, I'm talking about historians in the next century. They're going to look back and say, what was that?
Exactly.
The problem is nowadays people are actually, they have to stand, they have to suffer, they have to go through, they have to muddle through. And they have to put up with it. When you have political leaderships that you cannot expel because they reproduce themselves nonstop, or even worse, they get sent to places of prestige after they prove their imbecility working inside Europe. We have Annalena 360 degrees presiding the UN General Assembly. I think this is the ultimate graphic illustration of the absolute suicidal stupidity of Europe. There you go.
I was shocked when I heard that. Is what's happening? Yeah.
Yes, it's tough, Nima. It's
When
tough.
when we look at these people who are running the show all over the world, you see, really that serious? Is that really serious?
No, it's not. It's toxic. It's not serious. It's toxic. And they get away with it.
Yeah,
And that's the worst part.
exactly.
Uf,
Muito obrigado, Pepe. Grande
obrigado a
prazer.
você, querido.
Como sempre.
Enorme prazer. Next week, St. Petersburg. So maybe it's going to be hard to talk to you next week.
Yeah.
I hope we can find a slot, but it's going to be very hard because over there is non-stop. And then you go to dinners, and then, it's... Okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah. See you soon,
See you.
Pepe.
Take care. Thank you. Cheers.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.